Welcome to season 7 of Messengers, and I was particularly looking forward to this one, to be with my old friend Open. You and I, we met back in 2010.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago,
Yeah.
It's 12 years ago now.
Yeah, and a lot has happened since then.
A lot has happened since then. I approached you because I wanted to interview you about a documentary I was making about 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And you ended up being in the film, basically most of you, because you had so much interesting stuff to share.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember 2 years later when 2012 finally happened that I was a little underwhelmed.
Right.
Because for some reason I thought it was going to be much more intense. But we'll get into that, obviously.
Yeah, okay.
We'll get into that in the next few episodes because there's lots of layers to this unfolding.
Yeah.
But what I'm interested in is, at the time you shared with me how your almost rude awakening happened.
Yeah.
And I think it would be great to share that with the viewer.
Sure, okay. It's a little complicated, so it takes place from two different perspectives. So I was working as a guide in the ether, and I was working with a spiritual seeker, a guy called Chris Bourne, and he was on a pretty powerful journey. He had a very full-on life in business, in academia, in sport, and didn't know he was on a spiritual journey. Probably many people are awakening don't. And he had this kind of crunch point in his life around about the age of 40. And he went into a big state of depression and questioning, the meaning of life. Why am I here? What's the purpose of all of this? Very successful businessman, all the trappings of success, car and house, family and everything else, but depressed. And so I'm working in the ether, working to, help illuminate different signs, synchronicities to help wake him up, bring him into that phase of his life, which the soul was calling for. And so an all expenses paid trip to Comdex in Las Vegas was arranged, shall we say. And he went out there in a very kind of mystical, magical sequence, and found himself standing on the precipice of the Grand Canyon, which is a short plane ride from Las Vegas. And that's when it really happened for him, a kind of complete breaking down moment. As you look into the vastness of reality, you've come from the trivia of daily life, which seems so important at the time, but here you are looking into the vastness of this canyon, this beautiful canyon, the energy and the light effects and everything that's going on. It was a massive breaking down moment for him. And it was like I was in the ether at the time, so I can reflect on him. It was like putting his hand through the canvas of reality, that kind of moment when people do that awakening moment to the matrix and breaking through that. And that precipitated tremendous connection with soul. And from that moment, the dialogue between us really intensified through signs and synchronicity and, really a dialogue going on. Not so much in words, but thoughts, feelings, emotions. And in the 10 days that followed, he went through a regression of his life, as you do actually when you pass on, but he was still here. He went through a regression of his life, seeing all the various situations, circumstances, what they were trying to tell him, what they were really about. Not about an end outcome, not about trying to make something happen, but really it's a reflection about who and what you are and the invitation to discover that. So he was going through that for a period of 10 days, and that precipitated ultimately, there was a lot of intervention starting to happen as well, which we'll talk about in the series. And when you light up in the higher dimensions, it's like moths to car headlamps. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of intervention was coming in. They'll try and derail awakening people, and they did with him. And flooded feelings, emotions, thoughts. He's on a busy midday motorway just outside of Oxford and just completely overwhelmed by this dialogue, which is on the one hand benevolent, and on the other hand interference coming in. And at one point he just lost control of the car, veered off the motorway, hit the speed barrier, went back across the motorway, hit the central reservation, was written off, is sitting there in the fast lane with cars coming this way. He knows that in the next second or two, he's going to die. And there's no equivocation about that. He knows he's going to die. Now, one of two things can happen in that situation. Either you go into fear, flat panic mode, which often clearly, happens with a lot of people, or you realize you cannot control reality. There's nothing you can now do. You can't even influence it. You've got family, friends, but there's no connection. There's nothing you can do in relation to them at that point. And so there was a complete letting go. And with that, the soul is expanding into multiple dimensions of reality. It's blissful. He's going to die any second, or that's the feeling, that's the sense, that's the knowing. But he's expanding in bliss, and the connection between us greatly intensified at that point. It's like a bridge was formed, and I was able to come much more into his field. He made it clear to me that he wanted to leave at that point. He wanted to ascend and move on. And I made it clear to him, well, look, in my understanding, what I see, you still have karma to process through. And so it would serve you to go back and fulfill that. And, I'll be there, I'll connect with you. There was a contemplation at that point that we would exchange places, that I would walk in, that he would leave and I would come in. But that didn't happen at that point. He went with the understanding that he should process out his karma. And so that knowing at a soul level brought him back in. And miraculously, which is a story in itself, all of the cars had come to a stop, come to a halt on the motorway, and not one car was trying to drive around the wreck. And someone, a very angelic kind of individual, physical, but angelic energy, opened the door, helped him out, crossed to the hard shoulder. Police came, paramedics checked him, vital signs are fine. Police didn't caution him or anything, or try to, as far as I'm aware, try to understand what had happened. And in half an hour, he's going back home. His write-off has been recovered. And from that point, our dialogue intensified on a day-to-day basis. And it really took him through the 5 gateways, which we spoke about in the film that is free on YouTube and has received a great, feedback from around the world. And I know that was the key purpose of him staying and being here, in order to share those 5 expansions of consciousness. Well, basically the last one left him, this was Gateway 4, and left him in the desert. He was really wanting to break down the boundaries of reality and really see beyond, because this had just lost all its meaning to him, as it has to many people. And he went out into the Negev, fasting, meditating for maybe 10 days. And
I remember you writing about this, yeah.
Yeah, powerful experiences. If you want to really, break down the barriers of reality, then fasting is a very powerful means to do it. And of course really in the desert as well.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, it left him at one point stranded in a place called the Prism Gorge, not having the energy to move on, caught in the sun, dehydrated, and activating his final aspect of karma, which was kind of flashing through his awareness, his 4D body. And at that point, he processed it. He clearly wanted to move on and leave, and was in the process of doing so. And then I was faced with a choice, an opportunity to, do I come in and do I complete the work that had been begun? Is that right? Does that feel right? We exchanged about that, not in words, but in thought form and feeling. He definitely wanted to move on, and so we agreed, yes, I would come in, and I would continue.
And who is I? Who is the I?
I am a soul. I call myself open. and I work with higher dimensionals. And I've, up to that point, had been working mainly as a guide in the ether, but also working the energy field and helping unblock different aspects of the energy field, especially in this location on Earth.
I mean, I've always known we're in a very transitional time,
Yeah.
but there have been moments where I thought, well, maybe someone 100 years ago thought they were in a transitional time, and 100 years before then. Would you say it is definitely unusually different right now?